you're planning to spend a bunch of money in the offseason, and there would be salary cap constraints anyway. I'm just curious.
We're going to spend all the money we have in offseason.
Well, that gets to the question that with new ownership, with the Adelson and Dumont families, what's your sense of their commitment to spending what would be necessary on the player salary front to go where the franchise wants to go?
Yeah, I don't think money's going to be an object. I think it's doing it the right way, bringing in people with good character. The money is not going to be the limiting factor. They want to win. We're going to be smart about it, though. But I don't expect we're not having money conversations.
On today's episode of Inside the Mavs, how the Mavericks were able to land Klay Thompson, what it actually means, and what the Mavericks' future looks forward to with Tim Cato of The Athletic here on Inside the Mavs. Here we go. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining us here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Joining me here on the program today, he covers the Dallas Mavericks for The Athletic, the only Mavericks podcast host and good friend of mine, Tim Cato, joining me here on the podcast. Tim, what's going on?
Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, trying to get used to the idea that we're slowing down just a little bit as we record this. I'm like 3 weeks away from vacation, so I'm like, got to hang in there for just maybe another week and a half or two, and then maybe take a little bit of break before, this whole thing gets back started a little bit later on this summer. So trying to navigate what it is to be in the middle of this whole free agency thing. How about you?
Yeah, I think so. We're trying to figure out when vacation's really going to get started. I've got Las Vegas Summer League coming up, so got to get through that first.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more interesting now that Bronny James is officially part of the Los Angeles Lakers, and of course he signed his deal to be a part with Los Angeles, and LeBron James signing his deal as well. But we're here to talk about the player that the Lakers couldn't get in some respects in terms of Klay Thompson, because for the Mavericks, this is the kind of player, and you've discussed this a little bit yourself, this is not the kind of player traditionally that the Mavericks have been able to secure in free agency. For you, how did this play out and how we got here with now Klay Thompson, 3-year, $50 million deal? Obviously has not been made official as of yet until we get to July 6th, but at the same time, we know he's on the way. How did we get here with Klay Thompson as being a member of the Mavericks now?
Yeah, I mean, it started with Nico Harrison and just the belief that Dallas had that it did not have to operate its front office. It's basketball business in the same way that it had for, over a decade with, under the Donnie Nelson, front office led, decision making. And I really think it led, the other big part is Kyrie Irving. And, I've referenced him, even now, Kyrie Irving playing in Dallas feels like someone pulling out an iPhone in a 1940s silent movie. There is something anachronistic about this glamour player playing in this decidedly not glamour market. And now it's all led to this moment where a star, and objectively Klay Thompson is a star. He is not the player he used to be. Maybe he is not a star player, but he is a star in the basketball world. And he looked at these two options of the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers, the most glamour market to ever exist within the context of the NBA. And he chose Dallas, and he preferred Dallas. It was his choice. It was something that he felt more comfortable about. There's been reporting about, Kyrie's influence and role in having that happen. There's been reporting and understanding about Klay Thompson just, not loving his experience in Golden State, another market that does have, the spotlight, the sometimes very harsh spotlight of negativity or just a focus on a player who is not performing at his peak or who is not who he once was. And in coming to Dallas, it's very different. It is objectively going to be a very different scenario and situation for him, and he chose that. He wanted that, and it's a testament to how different and how much this franchise has changed under new leadership. And it's just something that would not have been imaginable, quite literally, with all of the Dallas free agency targets and misses over the decade that followed the post championship team. Just something completely unimaginable to what this franchise used to represent, but something that really marks something special about what this franchise is now.
I want to read a quote from your colleague Sam Amick of The Athletic, because it struck me because of the way that he framed it and how the Mavericks were able in some ways to get this done. He said, quote, "The Mavericks in turn did just that. They met him where he was, both figuratively and literally, respecting his 4 rings and making it clear that he was their top priority this offseason, excuse me," end quote. And I found that to be interesting because you talked about the star name that Klay Thompson is, but at this stage of his career at 34, while still in a very effective 3-point shooter, some of the reporting that you had mentioned, he felt disrespected in Golden State and the way that things have gone down the last couple of years. Even just a couple of weeks ago, we've seen reporting that he was offered a 2-year deal at $20 million per year, but the gap was just too much and the relationship was just not recoverable at that point. But the Mavericks felt like they could meet that need based off of what they felt like Klay could bring to this team. How do you believe that they were able to achieve that based off of where he is in his career and what the Mavericks need him to do based off of what they need for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's what all that reporting has said. It's what the quote said. I think that's exactly it. They met him where he was. They understood where he was in his career. They understood that Dallas is a place that can be more of a family and be more of a place that is comforting, and it is a place where you can focus on basketball, and there's not going to be as much of the the nonsense, the conversations, the off the court scrutiny and examination, even to an extent the on the court scrutiny. That, of course, that's going to come with stuff. Of course, that's going to come with it, but a lot of that is something that Luka and then Kyrie will shoulder. And this is just a place where I think Klay Thompson will be able to come and play basketball. And it's a place where, a team just coming off the finals needs somebody like him, needs someone with his skill set. And so I think that's what Dallas represented to him. And, the people leading the Mavericks, the new regime, those in charge, were the right people to convey that message to Klay and to convince him of how much change has happened to this franchise.
And to the point where he could be a real focal point on this team. And it's interesting because this player really did his homework on this team prior to making his decision. And part of the discussion that I feel like, that we have to have based on him, deciding to join the Mavericks is, a lot of this, I feel like, Tim, isn't possible unless the Mavericks make the run to the finals that they do, and being able to be on that stage where he gets to look at and examine, what, I can help this team in this specific area. And it's now to the point where he felt like this was the best basketball decision, even from all the things that the Lakers could have provided, whether it be more money or playing with LeBron James, his father calling his games on the radio, all of those things. But he felt like the basketball fit was better for him here. And I think that's a major part that has to be discussed because of where the Mavericks are going based on what they have on this roster now.
Yeah, I think there's some proof of concept. I think that objectively, if Luka just continued playing, let's say in the Thunder series, in the semifinals, if Luka continued playing like he had in Game 1, he was just hurt, he was unable to be himself, and they lose that series. Objectively, Dallas is still in a better place than the Lakers, but being able to show that over, 2 more series to be the finalists, to come out of the Western Conference, even with the finals not being that competitive. I do think that, like I said, it's proof of concept, and it matters even if objectively things had gone differently. I still think that would have been the case. But when you're playing on that stage, everything that is working, that is positive, that is optimistic, is showcased in a really special way, and I do think Dallas was able to do that.
Before we take a quick break here, from your standpoint, what are the Mavericks getting in Klay Thompson at 34 years old, 4-time NBA champion, former, all defensive player? What are they getting exactly from Klay Thompson going into this stage of his career now, in your mind?
The best spot up, catch and shoot, jump shooter in the league, period. He still is that player. There is nobody better. He is not the best 3-point shooter, but he is the best 3-point finisher. He is the best 3-point player, spot up guy. He is the best in the league, and I think he will easily retain that title next season. And that's exactly what this team needs. It's what they did not have last season, and it makes a lot of sense that that's who they went out and got. And yeah, there are some quibbles about how everything else is going to fit. There's curiosities about how the offense, whether it shifts a little bit more into movement and motion to use these skill sets, to use this danger that Klay invokes upon opposing defenses. There's some questions about his defense and just whether Dallas is going to take a step back about how they can navigate having 3 players who are not all 3 players 1 through 3. Obviously, replacing 30 minutes of Derrick Jones Jr. with 30 minutes of Klay Thompson is going to be a downgrade defensively. But I think it's very clear to me that this is quite possibly going to be the best offense in the league, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. So I'm definitely looking at this move with with measured, but certainly with optimism.
More with Tim Cato of The Athletic on the Mavs free agency so far and what it means for them going forward. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, a thank you to today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, in Aura, with Tim Cato of The Athletic, talking all things Mavericks, as of course their big free agent acquisition in Klay Thompson and a sign and trade with the Golden State Warriors, as that deal will become official later on this week. And we started to touch on it a little bit, Tim, when it came to just how the Mavericks were able to meet Klay where he was and be able to really help him understand what he could do for this team. And part of this discussion too is the fact, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, Kyrie Irving, of course, they're part of the same shoe company together. His ability to be able to connect with players, he's well respected around the league, but he also being able to be a part of this discussion as well. What has he meant, not just to obviously this team, but moving forward, how he continues to influence how this roster is able to get put forward, even with Nico Harrison and Jason Kidd in this front office and coaching staff being able to have a vision for Klay Thompson.
What's been written about Klay Thompson and what's been described about how much, just the joy he didn't have last season playing in the Warriors, it's a lot different than Kyrie, to be clear. Klay was in a situation where it was inevitable he was going to be compared to the player he once was, a player he no longer is, and just being able to quiet that noise and be the player he is now without those shadows and echoes and haunting memories of a past player following him around, Golden State, the Bay Area. I think that's good for him. Obviously, Kyrie, his situation, his public image is something that he brought upon, himself in a lot of ways. But obviously, if Klay feels that way, and Kyrie was someone who spoke to him about this process, and what better example is there of a player who was able to come to Dallas to get away from that noise? Again, not absolving Kyrie for having some responsibility in that, and to really have a renaissance when it comes to his public image and who he is as a basketball player. There's no question that Kyrie is a great example of that, and affected or eased Klay's made it easier for Klay to make this decision. I think Kyrie is a great representation for anybody who wants to come here, that of what this team is, of what this team is able to be. For Dallas to get this version of Kyrie also speaks to Dallas and the situation in Dallas, that Kyrie has very famously beefed and feuded with past front offices and organizations that he's been with. Absolutely, it's up to Kyrie that he embraced this opportunity in Dallas with open arms, but at the same time, it was a situation willing to embrace him right back. And I think that's important, and it speaks to where Dallas is as a franchise right now. And it's definitely something that matters and is very noticed by players around the league.
Yeah, his influence continues to be widespread within this organization, as it already is across the league. And it's interesting because I want to get your take on this, because I feel like in learning and reading some of the reporting about how this all came to be for Klay Thompson, that at 34 years old, he feels like a player that's defiantly trying to shed what has been kind of the reputation for him over the last couple of years, is that folks on the outside think that he's a washed player, and that some of the things that he has shown or his incapabilities are things that are now just a part of what he is as a player. And the motivation, it feels like, is there clearly for this player to prove all of that wrong. Do you get that sense from what you've learned about him over the last, several days, in terms of how this has all calmed down for him to be a part of this team in that way?
Yeah, that sounds right to me, based off what I've read as well. My co-host on the Only Mavericks podcast, Austin Guria, he talked about how Klay is someone who, as we've watched him over the years, he is clearly someone who plays with joy. And that's important to him, being his best self. And he hasn't had that. He certainly didn't have that last season in Golden State. Maybe he hasn't had that for a couple years. And I think in Dallas, this is his chance to get back to what he loves about playing basketball, just like we've seen Luka go through that cycle and Kyrie go through that cycle. I think that's important to him. I think it's important to how successful he's going to be here in Dallas. But I think it's something that's very obtainable for him in this market, within this team, in this organization. I think it's something that we're going to see.
And Klay joins a team that has gone through changes already prior to him getting here. Tim Hardaway Jr., now a member of the Detroit Pistons, in exchange for Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall here on a 3-year, $27 million deal. I want to start with Marshall, because how he came to be based off of the Derrick Jones Jr. situation has been something for Mavericks fans to kind of continue to wrap their minds around. From your reporting, you had described that the Mavericks had offered the same 3-year, $27 million deal to Derrick Jones Jr., but at the same time, it wasn't able to work out. And Najee Marshall, who's an up-and-coming player at 26 years old, now gets the opportunity, with this Mavericks team. From your understanding, how did we get here with Derrick Jones Jr.? That was, reporting about, from you in terms of his agency and the switch there. What happened with that to where he's now a member of the Los Angeles Clippers in that way?
So here's a tiny little tidbit that I have not actually said out loud anywhere. I had heard Najee Marshall, also Isaac Okoro, as potential Jones replacements as early as the Thunder series. And look, that's how front offices operate. They're always operating with contingency plans. I had also heard in that same breath that at the time, Dallas did not expect to retain Derrick Jones. At the time, it ran contrary to what I was hearing, and I quite frankly didn't believe it. And I'm still not sure it was true because, when the finals ended and in the week that followed, my understanding was that Derrick Jones was likeliest to return to the team. And that really dramatically changed when he changed representation and he decided to go to Clutch, to sign with Clutch. And there is and this is legal stuff. There is a 15-day waiting period, before you can leave an agency. You have to, dictate that you are leaving it, and that waiting period, unless it's waived, is supposed to remain in place. And I guess either whether it was a workaround, whether it didn't happen, whether there's other stuff going on behind the scenes. Like clearly he signed with the Clippers, but I what I reported on June 30th, kind of the afternoon leading into free agency, was just my understanding that the agency change had made a big impact on Dallas's ability or willingness, to some degree. I just knew it had affected Dallas's expected ability or the likelihood that Dallas was going to re-sign him. That doubt was creeping into that whole process. That's something that seemed like a 95% lock had suddenly fallen to something much lower than that. And yeah, that same 3 for 27 deal that they had on the table for Jones, that clearly he had, not he had not accepted it clearly, but it did seem like he was going to. All of a sudden that changed and he went to the Clippers, and I don't understand exactly every aspect of how that happened, but I do know the agency change affected things. And I do know that, Najee Marshall was somebody that they had long seen and scouted and looked into as a contingency plan, as someone who they liked, and they just turned around and offered that deal to him. And that's how Najee Marshall is a Maverick. And I am, I think we'll find out. I don't think there's any way, I don't think the best analyst in the world can tell you for sure right now which player is going to be more important, whether it's going to be a small upgrade or small downgrade. In fact, I think it's going to be, close enough. I think the two players and their productions are going to be close enough to each other that, there's no way to really know for sure. I think they're in a lot of ways, there's a lot of one-to-one replicated abilities between the two players. But that's some of what I understand about how this whole little swap happened. And the rest is something that certainly I'm interested in learning more about and may be able to here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, Derrick Jones Jr. now a member of the Clippers, that 3-year, $30 million deal. They had some money open up because Paul George decided to take his talents to Philadelphia to team up with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And now for this Mavericks team, based off of what they have here, we talked about with Najee Marshall and also Quentin Grimes as well. We're looking at, an 8-9 man rotation right now that looks pretty good on paper based off of what they have here. How would you assess what the Mavericks have been able to do, in essence, turning Tim Hardaway Jr., Derrick Jones Jr., and Josh Green into Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, and Quentin Grimes? You sacrifice a couple of second-round picks to move on to get Klay Thompson. But at the same time, how would you assess where this team is now after what they finished the season with, ending in the NBA Finals against Boston?
I think every player who was a inconsistent, spotty, questionable shooter has been replaced by somebody who is more prolific in taking those threes. I think there's Quentin Grimes is the most interesting player to me, and we'll see. I don't think it should be assumed that he's just going to all of a sudden be this player he was his second year in New York. But I think there's a whole lot of optimism that he could be that player, and a whole lot of excitement if he is able to be that player and what it would represent to Dallas. But this is a team that was unable to reliably hit spot up shots created by Luka and Kyrie. And that made it really difficult on Luka and Kyrie. And we saw that most specifically in the NBA Finals. And this team's completely different now. They have completely bolstered and strengthened that area of the team, and in my view, a really impressive way. And they've taken a step back defensively to do that. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They're not going to be as good of a defensive team, but they're also, down the stretch of the regular season, they were the best defense in the NBA. And trying to thread that needle and find a balance between a defense that led them to the NBA Finals and an offense that failed them once they got there is what they needed to do this offseason. And I think they've done a admirable job trying to solve that. And, from my view, before this team has played a game, I think that they've, certainly solved it in some areas. It will take the regular season, in which I expect them to be very good, to really learn exactly how well they potentially solve that issue, and whether maybe, at the trade deadline, they're looking to make more moves or looking to, shuffle the team around just a little bit more in a small way. But the continuity, the core of this team remains intact in a way that I think they should have done, and they did succeed in doing. And I think they're in a great position to go into next season, no matter what other moves teams have made, no matter how good Oklahoma City looks. This should be a team going into next season expecting or believing that they can be at the top of the Western Conference when the season ends.
And they won 50 games last year, a team that was able to finish in the top 5 in the West. The West continues to get strong, as we've seen so far during this offseason. And I want to ask you this about Klay, because, folks will have questions about, with Klay, the idea was he wasn't, keen on the idea of coming off the bench again in Golden State. Obviously, Brandon Podziemski had a really nice rookie year and was starting to really assert himself there as a starter, potentially going forward for the Golden State Warriors. How comfortable are you with Klay as a starter with this team, given what he is and what they're asking him to do, and how that affects how the Mavericks want to get after teams night after night?
Well, if you like the Klay move, then he's going to be a starter. That was part of signing him. And so, that has to be baked into this. I do think a lot of what's going to make this move succeed more or succeed less, because I do think it will be I do think it's a good move. I do think that it will work well, at least for this season. It's going to be whether he is, the Jason Kidd and his coaching staff and all the people around this organization can make sure he understands that, there may be times where it doesn't make sense for him to close games, that he is going to be on a very staggered minute rotation, that sometimes maybe it does make sense for him to only play 20 to 25 a night. He averaged a shade under 30 minutes last season for Golden State. I expect his minute totals to be, something near that. But maybe it's only 27 or 28 minutes per game. And if that's what the right move for the team is, then it's important to make sure that Klay agrees, and Klay kind of, is able to, embrace this opportunity for what it is, even if it's not quite the same as it once was. But look, he's going to be a starter. That was baked into the entire pursuit of him. And yes, it poses some questions. I don't think Klay is a completely washed, cooked, done, terrible defender. I do think that, like a lot of players on this team, he is better off guarding 3s and 4s. And there are not a lot of players on this team ideally suited to guard 1s and 2s. That is something that a very good defensive scheme with defensive help behind you, like Dallas has, can mitigate to an extent. But certainly I think Derrick Jones's ability to, guard a Paul George as well as he can guard a Tyrese Maxey or a Jamal Murray or a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I think that is something that's going to be missed a little bit next season. But Dallas is a good team that has a lot of, defensive talent, and it's going to be up to the coaching staff to figure that out, to make it all work. And I think after last season, seeing what they were able to do after the deadline, you should believe in them being able to figure that out.
Lastly, before we get you out of here today, obviously everything centers around Luka Doncic and his abilities to continue to drive this team Of course, making his first NBA Finals appearance, was a top 3 MVP candidate this year. And he's right now trying to help Slovenia qualify for the Olympics. There's been a lot of criticism of the player for the fact that he's still continuing to deal with injury and playing in this tournament. But you and I know, and a lot of people know, he's going to play. If he's hurt or not, he's going to play with Team Slovenia. For you, what he's going through and trying to help Slovenia do, but more importantly for his team going into next year, where do you feel like he is after all of this, the amount of basketball he's played really for the last couple of years now, and what that means for his health going forward, and how the Mavericks will try to help him approach that going into this upcoming season with all the anticipation now with this roster the way it is based on how it's been built?
I mean, I don't have a great answer. I don't know exactly which injury, what it is, and what's affecting him most. This is something that he has been behind the scenes very sure and very he's just very certain he doesn't want to talk about it. He's very stubborn, maybe that's the word, that this is he does not want the details of his injuries, of his injury stuff out there. He does not want it to be used as an excuse. And that's kind of just comes baked into his personality. And that said, he's clearly, not been 100%. And I don't have an answer of like what's going to fix it. He said during the postseason that it's not going to be until the summer that he's able to rest, that it heals. And that's, even behind the scenes in conversations I have, that's, I don't get much more of an answer than that. And so the hope is just that whenever this season ends, and if he is inhibited, and if he is not 100% himself, these things are kind of playing into each other, that, if he's not able to be Luka Doncic, then Slovenia probably isn't going to, much of a contender. I haven't been following that closely, to be honest. I've needed a little bit of a break from basketball, so I don't know exactly where his qualifications stand. But I've seen the discourse, and I've seen, enough of, clips enough to know that he still kind of looks like the plodding, not quite 100% version of himself. And I guess the question is, just when his season ends and how he looks coming into, this next season that's going to start not so long from now. Training camps at the end of September. Obviously, he's going to be given some time, even into the start of the regular season to, if he were to need it, he would absolutely be given that time. Dallas understands that they're now playing on a, they now go into regular seasons with a 100 game schedule in mind, not an 82 game one. And so it wouldn't shock me at all if Luka really needs that time to begin the season. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not reporting this. I've not been told this, but I do think it's very clear that Dallas is going to do what it needs to do to make sure this is a healthy player who can play into May and June if necessary, and do everything they can to try to get him to that point. They have an understanding of who Luka is, and Luka, I think, understands that as well. But how that all plays out just depends on what happens, and depends on what his injuries are, and depends on how they heal whenever he finally sets down a basketball for a few weeks. And, obviously I think we all want him to get back to that 100% version of himself, because that's the player we enjoy watching. And I'm sure one way or the other, we're going to be able to get back to that. So I'm not too worried about him. I just don't know exactly what the process of him getting healthy is going to look like.
Yeah, and the Mavericks have put themselves in a position where they're going to be playing a lot of deep playoff games based off of what we believe that this team is going to be over the next several years, with Luka Doncic leading the way, of course. Tim, tell the folks so they can find you what we can look forward to from you a little bit this summer here.
I think everybody knows Twitter, podcast, The Athletic, all those places. And I don't know, trying to figure out right now, there's some stuff I'm going to be working on in Summer League, and then we'll figure out what's to come after that. So stay tuned.
Well, it should be a continuation of an exciting summer for this Mavericks squad based off of what they've already done in free agency and the anticipation for what's to come coming into this next season. Tim, as always, my man, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me here on the show. I know you're looking forward to a little bit of a break once this all settles down to be able to rest and recover a little bit, but I appreciate you hanging out with me on the show today, man. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to do it, man.
That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you to Tim Cato, The Athletic, for joining me here on this episode. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. Like and comment and subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And follow me there as well. I'm, of course, your Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.